I remember the moment vividly, as if it were etched in my mind with indelible ink. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow through the living room window, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. It was one of those moments that felt deceptively peaceful, where everything seemed normal, but the storm was brewing just beneath the surface. My wife, Sarah, was sitting across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her brow furrowed slightly. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, sensing that something was off, but I couldn't have anticipated the words that would follow. As she spoke, her voice trembled, and I watched her lips form the words that would change everything. "I think we should take a break." The air thickened around us. My heart raced, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over me. A break. The term hung in the air like a heavy fog, obscuring the clarity I sought. What did that even mean? My mind raced back through the years we had spent together. The laughter, the late-night talks, the dreams we had shared. I was lost in a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. "Why?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking. "It's just, I feel like I need time to figure things out. I want to explore other options." Her words struck me like a physical blow. Explore other options. The thought of her with someone else felt like a knife twisting in my gut. My mind flashed to images of her laughter shared with another man, the intimate moments we had built together now tainted by the possibility of infidelity. How could she do this to us, to me? I searched for the right words, but all I could muster was silence. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. The life we had built together suddenly felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. I thought of our vows, the promises we had made in front of family and friends. For better or worse, I whispered to myself, the weight of those words pressing down on my chest. As I looked into her eyes, searching for some glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with, I found only uncertainty. The warmth that used to radiate between us had been replaced by a chilling distance. "Is there someone else?" I blurted out, my voice tinged with desperation. "No, it's not about anyone else. It's about me," she replied, her eyes darting away, avoiding my gaze. I felt a mix of relief and despair. Relief that there was no one else, but despair because it meant this was a struggle within her. A struggle that I had somehow failed to notice. I wanted to scream, to shake her, and demand to know why we had come to this point. But instead I sat there, paralyzed by the reality of our situation. The conversation continued, but all I could think about was the word break. It echoed in my mind, twisting and turning like a serpent, coiling around my thoughts. What did it mean for us? Would we come back together, or was this the beginning of the end? As she spoke of needing space and time, I felt a heavy weight settling in my chest. The very foundation of our relationship was shaking, and I was powerless to stop it. I didn't want to lose her, but I also didn't want to be the man who stood in the way of her self-discovery. When the conversation finally ended, I felt like I had been stripped bare, exposed to the world's harshest elements. The love we had built felt fragile, and the future I had envisioned was now clouded with uncertainty. I sat alone in that room, the shadows growing longer as night fell, grappling with the reality that my wife wanted to take a break that felt to me like an open door leading into an abyss. In that moment, I knew I was at a crossroads. The path ahead was unclear, but I sensed that something had irrevocably changed. I was about to be tested in ways I could never have imagined. After the conversation with Sarah, everything felt surreal. I went through the motions of daily life, but my mind was a swirling chaos of thoughts and emotions. The word break echoed relentlessly in my head, becoming a haunting mantra. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, even if she insisted it wasn't about someone else. It was about her, and that was enough to make me feel discarded, like a worn-out shoe left behind in a closet. I spent the next few days in a haze, questioning everything. What did a break entail? Was it just a temporary pause in our relationship, or was it a precursor to something more permanent? The idea of her exploring other options gnawed at me, and I found myself obsessively replaying our last conversation. I felt trapped between wanting to fight for our marriage and the fear of pushing her further away. A break meant she would have space to think, to breathe, to potentially find someone else. The thought made my stomach turn. I tried to reason with myself to understand her perspective. She claimed she needed time to figure things out, but all I could think about was the possibility of losing her. I loved her deeply, but what if this was just a convenient way for her to step away from the commitment we had built together? I started to analyze every moment of our relationship. Had I missed the signs? Had I been so engrossed in my own world that I failed to see her struggles? I pored over our recent interactions, searching for clues, for any indication that she was unhappy. I recalled moments when she seemed distant, when her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. Each memory cut deeper than the last, and I felt a growing sense of helplessness. On one particularly sleepless night, I found myself sitting on the edge of our bed, staring into the darkness. I could still smell her perfume lingering on the pillow, a bittersweet reminder of the love we once shared. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I knew I had to decide what to do next, but the weight of that decision felt unbearable. Should I let her go? Should I give her the space she claimed to need? Or should I fight for our marriage, even if it meant risking everything? The internal conflict raged on, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I was scared of being the man who let his wife wander away, but I was equally terrified of suffocating her with my desperation. I began to explore the idea of a permanent separation. The thought terrified me, but I couldn't ignore the possibility that this break could be the push Sarah needed to realize she wanted something else. I thought about the last time we had been truly happy together. Was there a chance that giving her the freedom she sought would ultimately bring us back together, or would it drive her further into the arms of another man? The more I thought, the more I realized that I had to confront the reality of our situation. A break could mean one of two things. Either it would allow us both to grow, or it would lead to an inevitable end. I had to prepare myself for both outcomes. I decided to reach out to a close friend for advice. Mark had been through his share of relationship struggles, and I hoped he could offer some clarity. We met at a local cafe, and I poured out my heart, detailing the events leading up to Sarah's suggestion. As I spoke, I could see the concern etched on Mark's face. "What do you really want?" he asked, leaning forward. "Do you want her back, or are you ready to let go?" His question struck me like a lightning bolt. I realized that I was clinging to the hope of what we once had, rather than facing the reality of what was unfolding. I wanted to believe that this was just a rough patch, a momentary lapse in our love story. But deep down, I knew I had to be honest with myself. I wanted her back, but I also wanted her to be happy. If that meant taking a break, then perhaps I needed to accept that. The thought of permanently severing ties felt like a death sentence for our love, but I also recognized that forcing her to stay wouldn't solve anything. As I sat in that cafe, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. It was time to make a decision. I would give her the space she needed, but I would also prepare myself for the possibility that this break might not lead us back together. I had to be strong enough to accept that our paths might diverge, and I needed to protect my heart in the process. The decision was made. I would let her take her break, but I would also begin to explore what life without her might look like. It was a painful realization, but it also felt like a necessary step toward reclaiming my own identity. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had to face it head-on. After Sarah suggested the break, life transformed into a series of disjointed moments. The routine that once comforted me became a source of anguish. I found myself waking up each morning to an empty bed, the silence echoing in the corners of our home. The walls that had witnessed our laughter now felt like a prison, each room a reminder of what I stood to lose. The first few days were the hardest. I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, going to work, meeting friends, but my mind was perpetually distracted. I felt like a ghost, floating through my own life, unable to fully engage with anything or anyone. At work, my productivity plummeted. Colleagues noticed my distracted demeanor, but I brushed off their concerns with vague excuses. "Just tired," I'd say, forcing a smile that never quite reached my eyes. During lunch breaks, I often found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, images of happier times, vacations, and celebrations. Each photo was a dagger to my heart. I longed for the intimacy we Once shared, the way we would talk for hours about anything and everything. Now, those conversations felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the reality of our separation. As the days turned into a week, I began to experience emotional highs and lows that felt almost cyclical. There were moments when I felt a flicker of hope, convincing myself that this break could lead to a better understanding between us. But those moments were often followed by deep valleys of despair, where I questioned everything: our love, our commitment, and even my own worth. I tried to distract myself with activities. I resumed my old hobbies, hiking, reading, and even took up cooking again, but nothing filled the void. I remember one evening standing in the kitchen, attempting to recreate a dish Sarah loved. As I chopped vegetables, tears streamed down my face, mixing with the ingredients. The realization hit me hard. I was alone, and I was afraid of what the future held. I began to reflect on our relationship in a way I had never done before. I thought about the moments we had shared, the dreams we had built together, and the gradual unraveling that had led us to this point. It was as if I was piecing together a puzzle of our marriage, trying to understand where things had gone wrong. I recalled the times I had failed to listen to her, the moments I had taken her for granted. I remembered the stress of work, the late nights I spent away from home, and how I had sometimes prioritized my career over our relationship. Was that what had driven her to seek a break? Had I pushed her away without realizing it? As the days turned into weeks, I began to experience an unsettling clarity. I couldn't keep living in limbo, waiting for her to decide what she wanted. I knew I had to confront my feelings and take control of my own life. The emotional turmoil was exhausting, and I needed to find a way to move forward, regardless of Sarah's decision. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the pages as a way to process my emotions. Writing became a cathartic release, allowing me to explore the depths of my heart. I wrote about my fears, my hopes, and the love I still held for Sarah, but I also wrote about my desires for self-discovery and growth. It was a way to reclaim my identity, to remind myself that I was more than just a husband facing a potential divorce. I also reached out to friends more frequently, seeking their support. They rallied around me, offering their ears and shoulders to lean on. I shared my struggles, and their empathy provided a lifeline during those dark moments. They reminded me that I was not alone, that I could find strength within myself, even if it felt buried beneath layers of pain. One night I found myself at a bar with Mark, the same friend who had encouraged me to think about what I truly wanted. We talked for hours, and I opened up about my fears of losing Sarah. "What if she never comes back?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Mark looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Then you need to be ready to let go. You can't hold on to something that doesn't want to be held." His words struck a chord deep within me. I realized that I had to prepare myself for the possibility of losing Sarah permanently. That night, I returned home with a mixture of dread and resolve. I stared at the empty space beside me, the weight of my loneliness pressing down. I knew I had to accept the reality of our situation, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. As the days continued to pass, I found a strange sense of empowerment in the uncertainty. I began to embrace the idea of self-discovery, focusing on my own needs and desires. I signed up for a workshop on personal growth, eager to learn more about myself and what I wanted out of life, with or without Sarah. The emotional highs and lows still came, but I was beginning to find a balance. I was learning to navigate the complexities of my feelings, and I could feel the fog of despair slowly lifting. I was no longer just a man waiting for his wife to return. I was a man on a journey of self-exploration, ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself immersed in a journey of self-reflection that I had never anticipated. The break that Sarah had suggested, which had initially felt like a devastating blow, began to transform into an opportunity for personal growth. I realized that the emotional turmoil I had experienced was not just about losing her, it was also about finding myself again. The workshop I had signed up for became a pivotal point in my journey. It was a space filled with people, each grappling with their own struggles, yet united by a common desire to grow. I found comfort in sharing my story, hearing others recount their experiences of heartbreak and loss. It was cathartic to know that I wasn't alone in my pain. Everyone in that room had faced their own demons, and together we forged a sense of community that felt healing. During one of the sessions, we were encouraged to delve into our values and aspirations. I sat in a circle of strangers, each person taking turns to share. When it was my turn, I hesitated, unsure of how to articulate my feelings. But as I spoke, something shifted within me. I've always defined myself through my relationships, I admitted, my voice wavering. I've been a husband, a friend, a son, but I've lost sight of who I am as an individual. The words spilled out and I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had spent years prioritizing my role as Sarah's husband, but in doing so, I had neglected my own identity. I realized that I had to reconnect with my passions, my dreams, and the essence of who I was before I could even consider what lay ahead for us as a couple, if anything at all. In the following weeks, I began to explore the things that had once brought me joy. I rediscovered my love for painting, something I had set aside during the hectic years of marriage. I bought a canvas and set up a small corner in my apartment, allowing the colors to flow freely as I expressed my emotions through art. Each brushstroke felt like a release, a way to channel my pain into something beautiful. I also took long hikes in nature, finding solace in the quiet moments spent surrounded by trees and mountains. The trails became my sanctuary, a place where I could reflect on my thoughts and feelings without the weight of the world pressing down on me. I began to appreciate the simple beauty of life, the way the sun filtered through the leaves and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. Nature became a reminder that life was still vibrant, even amid my struggles. Through this process of self-discovery, I began to unravel the layers of my identity. I realized that I had often sought validation from others, particularly from Sarah. My self-worth had been tied to our relationship, and when that foundation shook, I felt lost. I started to understand that my happiness could not solely depend on another person. It had to come from within. As I continued to reflect on love and trust, I grappled with the complexities of relationships. I thought about the trust that had been broken, and the painful realization that I had allowed myself to become vulnerable in ways that left me susceptible to heartache. I pondered the delicate balance of intimacy and independence, recognizing that true love flourished when both partners could stand strong on their own. In my journaling, I wrote about the lessons I was learning. I explored the idea that love is not just about possession or control, but about mutual growth and respect. I wanted to be the kind of partner who could support someone else's journey while also nurturing my own. This realization was both liberating and daunting, as it meant I had to confront my own fears and insecurities. One evening, as I sat in my makeshift art studio, I found myself reflecting on the nature of forgiveness. I realized that while I felt betrayed by Sarah's suggestion for a break, I also had to forgive myself for the times I had failed to be present in our relationship. I had to let go of the anger that had been festering within me, allowing space for healing. I began to understand that forgiveness was not just about absolving others of their wrongs, but also about freeing myself from the shackles of resentment. It was a process, one that would take time, but I was determined to embrace it. I wanted to move forward, whether that meant reconciling with Sarah or finding a new path altogether. As I reflected on my journey, I felt a sense of empowerment growing within me. I was no longer the man defined solely by his marriage. I was a person with dreams, aspirations, and a renewed sense of purpose. The break had forced me to confront my own identity, and in doing so I was beginning to reclaim my life. With each passing day, I grew more confident in my ability to navigate whatever lay ahead. Whether that meant opening my heart to Sarah again or discovering new relationships, I was ready to face the future with a clearer understanding of myself. I was learning to love myself first, understanding that true fulfillment came from embracing who I was, independent of anyone else. In the quiet moments of reflection, I found a flicker of hope. No matter the outcome of my relationship with Sarah, I was on a path towards self-discovery that would ultimately lead me to a brighter future. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, yet the uncertainty of Sarah's absence lingered like a shadow over my heart. I had poured myself into self-reflection, rediscovering my passions and learning to embrace solitude, but the question of our relationship still loomed large. The break had given me the space I needed, but it had also forced me to confront some hard truths about love, commitment, and the future. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I felt a familiar wave of melancholy wash over me. The vibrant colors painted across the sky mirrored the complexity of my emotions. I had spent so much time trying to figure out what I wanted, but I hadn't fully considered what Sarah might want. The thought of her exploring her options was still painful, but I understood that I could no longer wait indefinitely for her to make a decision. I decided it was time to reach out. I picked up my phone and stared at her name for a long moment, my heart racing. It felt surreal to be taking this step after all the time that had passed. Finally, I mustered the courage to send her a text. "Can we talk? I think we need to discuss where we stand." I hit send and watched as the message disappeared into the ether. The weight of anticipation settled in my chest, and I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve. I didn't know what our conversation would bring, but I knew I had to be honest with her and with myself. When Sarah replied, suggesting we meet at our favorite cafe, I felt a rush of emotions. Nostalgia washed over me as I remembered the countless afternoons we had spent there sipping coffee and sharing dreams. But this time the stakes felt much higher. On the day of our meeting, I arrived early, my mind racing with thoughts and possibilities. I ordered a coffee and sat at a table in the corner, watching as couples filled the cafe, their laughter and warmth a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt inside. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say, but the words felt inadequate. When Sarah finally walked in, a mix of emotions flooded over me. She looked beautiful as always, but there was an unfamiliar distance in her eyes. We exchanged greetings and I gestured for her to sit. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, and I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. "I'm glad we could meet," she said, her voice soft yet uncertain. "Me too," I replied, taking a deep breath. "I think we need to talk about what this break has meant for us." As we spoke, I felt the weight of everything we had experienced pressing down on us. Sarah shared her feelings of confusion and uncertainty, her struggles with her own identity and desires. I listened intently, trying to understand her perspective. It was clear that this break had been a journey for both of us, but it also became apparent that we were not on the same path. When it was my turn to speak, I laid bare my feelings. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on our relationship," I began, "and I've realized that I can't keep waiting for you to decide what you want. I love you, but I also need to take care of myself." Her eyes widened, and I could see the conflict within her. "Are you saying you want to end things?" she asked, her voice quivering. "I think it's time for me to let go," I said, my heart aching with each word. "This break has shown me that I need to prioritize my own happiness, and I can't do that while holding on to the hope of us. I need to move forward, whatever that looks like." Tears welled in her eyes, and I felt my own heart breaking at the sight. "I didn't want it to come to this," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I know," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "But I can't keep living in limbo. I need to embrace my own life, and I think you need to do the same." We sat in silence for a moment, both grappling with the enormity of what was unfolding. It felt surreal to be sitting across from the woman I had shared so much with, knowing that we were on the brink of a final decision. "Do you think there's any chance for us in the future?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of uncertainty. "But I think we both need to find ourselves first. Maybe one day we can reconnect, but for now I need to focus on moving forward." The conversation continued, filled with shared memories and unspoken regrets. We talked about the good times, the laughter, and the love that had once defined us. But we also acknowledged the distance that had grown between us, the cracks that had formed in our foundation. As we parted ways that day, I felt a sense of relief mixed with profound sadness. It was a decision that had been brewing for months, yet it still felt like a loss. I watched her walk away, the weight of our shared history heavy on my heart. In the days that followed, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions. There was a sense of finality in my decision, a clarity that came from accepting the reality of our situation. I had let go of the hope that had kept me tethered to a relationship that no longer served either of us. But there was also grief. I mourned the loss of the future I had envisioned with Sarah, the dreams we had shared. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I was determined to embrace it. I had taken a step toward reclaiming my life, and while the journey was fraught with uncertainty, it was also filled with the promise of new beginnings. As the weeks turned into months after my final decision to let Sarah go, I found myself navigating a new chapter in my life, a chapter filled with both challenges and unexpected joys. The pain of our separation lingered like a distant echo, but with each passing day, I felt more empowered to embrace the future that lay ahead. In the aftermath of our breakup, I took the time to focus on myself fully. I immersed myself in my painting, creating pieces that reflected my journey of healing. Each stroke of the brush became a form of catharsis, a way to express the emotions I had bottled up for so long. The canvas transformed into a mirror of my soul, capturing the essence of my heartache, but also the strength I was discovering within myself. I also continued attending the personal growth workshops. The support I found there became a lifeline, reminding me that I wasn't alone in my struggles. I forged new friendships with people who were also on their own paths of self-discovery. We shared our stories of heartbreak and resilience, and I found solace in the shared experience of human vulnerability. It was liberating to connect with others who understood the depths of emotional pain, and together we celebrated our victories, no matter how small. Over time, I began to explore new possibilities. I took weekend trips to places I had always wanted to visit, indulging in the freedom of spontaneity. I hiked through breathtaking landscapes, stood atop mountains that made me feel alive, and marveled at the beauty of the world around me. Each adventure became a step toward reclaiming my sense of self, a reminder that life continued to unfold in vibrant colors, even in the absence of the love I once cherished. In my solitude, I learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the sound of rain tapping against the window, the warmth of a cup of coffee in my hands, the stillness of a sunset. I discovered that happiness could be found in the simple pleasures of life, and that I didn't need someone else to complete me. I was learning to love myself, to be my own source of joy and fulfillment. As the seasons changed, I began to feel a sense of closure regarding my relationship with Sarah. I reflected on the lessons I had learned, the importance of communication, the necessity of self-love, and the understanding that love, while powerful, could not be forced. I had given Sarah the space she needed, and in doing so, I had also given myself the opportunity to grow. One day, as I was painting in my studio, I received a message from Sarah. My heart raced as I opened it, uncertain of what to expect. She wanted to meet for coffee to catch up and talk. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Had she found clarity in her own journey? Did she want to reconnect as friends, or was there still a flicker of hope for us? When we met, I was struck by how much we had both changed. The conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and nostalgia. We spoke about our lives since the breakup, the lessons we had learned, and the paths we were forging. It was clear that we had both embarked on journeys of self-discovery, and while the love we once shared was different now, there was a sense of mutual respect and understanding. As we parted ways that day, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I realized that while our romantic relationship had come to an end, the bond we had built was not entirely lost. We had both grown, and in that growth, we had found a new way to appreciate one another. Looking back, I understood that the break Sarah had suggested had been a catalyst for profound change in both of our lives. It had forced me to confront my own identity, to embrace my passions, and to learn the importance of self-love. I had emerged from the experience not only as a stronger individual, but also with a clearer understanding of what I wanted in future relationships. As I continued on my journey, I carried the lessons of our relationship with me. I had learned that love is not about possession or control, but about growth, respect, and the ability to support one another's journeys. I felt ready to embrace new beginnings, knowing that whatever lay ahead would be shaped by the strength I had discovered within myself. In the end, I realized that sometimes, taking a break can lead to the most profound transformations. It may feel like an ending, but it can also be the beginning of something beautiful, a journey of self-discovery, healing, and ultimately, the possibility of love in its many forms. With a heart full of hope, I stepped forward into the future, ready to embrace whatever came next.